way above where they should be. We will find out this week if we are officially in a recession, despite what you might be hearing from the Biden administration. Also, and this is unbelievable news, interest rates could climb over, this is for a mortgage, they could climb over 6% for the first time in 22 years. The Fed is going to meet this week. They could raise rates by a full basis point. Pretty amazing. For more, let's welcome in commentary editor for the Washington Times and NewsMax contributor Kelly Sadler, constitutional law attorney and former prosecutor and NewsMax contributor Amir Benno, and former Trump campaign aide, author and NewsMax contributor Rick Gates. Rick, want to talk to you about this. So interest rates, the highest they ever got, at least in the last 50 years, 18%. If you were, imagine taking, you're trying to get a 30-year fixed on a house and your interest rate for the mortgage is 18%. That was right at the tail end of Jimmy Carter. Who is Joe Biden compared to most often? It's Jimmy Carter. Right now, interest rates are right around 5.5%. The Fed could raise them by a full point, meaning they'd be at 6.5% by the end of this week. That's the highest since the year 2000. Also, we're going to get GDP numbers, Rick, on Thursday. If they are down again, that would be the second consecutive quarter, which would mean we are in a recession. But the White House said over the weekend, no, that's an old metric for how we evaluate when we're actually in a recession. What do you make of that?
Yeah, you would think by now that the Biden administration would not use the word transition or transitory in terms of describing anything with the economy. And I think that has put them in a massive hole. And this is what's led to the failed policies that they have been kind of propagating up. And look, there are a lot of economists that say, we need the interest rates to go higher in order for the economy to cool down and get back to a normal level. I don't see, even with interest rates climbing, that's necessarily going to happen. They keep saying that we need more interest rates. How many hikes have there already been? I think 3. This would be the 4th, and they've been significant hikes, in terms of impacting the economy. So this is exactly what happens when you don't have a plan, when you don't have an economic strategy from the start of your administration. And every decision that the Biden administration has made and Joe Biden has made has had a consequence, and those consequences have now kind of, compiled and have a domino effect. And that's what's going to, I think, lead to massive losses for them in the midterms come November. Yeah.
Also this week, Amir, we'll get the consumer confidence index. We'll get those numbers. They are expected to be really bad, close to record bad. The problem with raising interest rates is we won't know if it's fixed the problem or made it worse, exacerbated the problem until it's too late. So Jay Powell and Janet Yellen, who still somehow have their jobs, are really playing with our economic future, because once you're formally in recession, it typically takes at least 24 months to get out of a recession.
Yeah, well, you know what? Whether or not we're technically or formally going to be in a recession or not, the facts on the ground are still awful for the average American when they pay at the pump, when they go to the grocery store. They don't have their earnings and what they're making. And the labor market may be strong, but their earnings, when compared to the rising cost of items, is unfortunately so poor that people are taking a financial hit. And that's what's really going to matter come the fall, come November, come the midterms. Whether or not it's officially a recession by the strict definition of it is almost irrelevant, because everybody can agree that we're in very bad economic and financial shape.
I agree, Amir, I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. I think a lot of people watching right now agree with you. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, she might agree with you as well, but she says that inflation, it peaked a long time ago. Take a listen.
Has inflation peaked?
I think probably. But look, if I had said that a year ago, assuming another war doesn't break out, assuming we don't have another COVID, there's so much out of our control. Inflation is a global problem.
Wow. Kelly, first of all, she did say that a year ago.
Yeah.
Lot to unpack there.
No, and you saw how she couched it, right? She said, yes, we're at a peak, but maybe not. Maybe if there's these other things that come into existence that are out of our hands, then it might not be. With the Fed meeting this week, I think the consensus among economists is they're going to raise it at least 75 basis points, the interest rates, to a full point. Now, the administration keeps touting the jobs market and how it's strong, and that we can't really consider, even if we have a contraction in GDP this week, the jobs market makes up for it, and we're not technically in a recession. But let me tell you, when the Fed takes those interest rate hikes this week, whether it be 75 basis points to a point. That's going to impact small businesses. That's going to affect our economy. It's going to affect the amount of money that they can borrow from banks. They're going to stop investing in their businesses. And what's that going to impact? That's going to impact the labor market.
Right.
Even Larry Summers said that he doesn't anticipate a soft landing with the Fed meeting this week, and that we're in a recession basically right now, and the American people feel it.
Yeah, take a listen to this. Al Gore, former vice president, of course, under Bill Clinton, was interviewed over the weekend. He was asked about reversing course to try to bring gas prices down. Listen to the comments he had to say.
Getting through this crisis with Russia's invasion is one thing. Getting past the election with gasoline prices, you know, they're already coming down. That's one thing. But investing in more fossil fuel infrastructure that will guarantee emissions increasing for decades into the future, that's a horrible mistake that at this point, we simply cannot afford to make that mistake.
Rick, isn't that interesting? The quiet part out loud. And I applaud the gas prices are going down. They've gone down for over 35 straight days, which is great. They went up for almost that many straight days before. National average today is still $4.35 a gallon. That is still 24 cents higher than the previous all-time high, which was set in 2008 at $4.11 a gallon. What do you make of comments like that from the former vice president?
Well, when you have the creator of the internet, making comments, you have to pay attention. So
and the lockbox.
And lockbox,
yes,
exactly.
Yes.
But when you have record high gas prices and they go down a few cents and they're still record high, that's not really something you can go out and say, hey, wow, we're really fixing this. We're on, a mission here. And I think comments like that are designed to obviously, help Democrats in the midterms. But he is not, Al Gore's never been one in touch, with the American people. And I think that's another comment that kind of goes, to that point.
Amir, New York Post with a headline over the weekend. Ron DeSantis, this is really interesting as we look toward 2024 and who the Republican nominee is going to be. DeSantis slams Biden at Florida GOP gala. So this gala was held down in Hollywood, Florida. I used to live in Tampa. The same night that DeSantis spoke there, the former president, Donald Trump, spoke up in Tampa at a Turning Point USA event. Don't forget, Fox News and the New York Post are owned by the same company. I've noticed this sort of trend. It seems like Fox and the Post are a little bit more in the bag for Ron DeSantis, kind of like they were for Donald Trump in 2016, but now it seems like they're pushing Ron DeSantis. Take a listen to what DeSantis had to say about Joe Biden over the weekend.
With Biden, you think of a guy staring into the teleprompter like a deer in the headlights. End of quote, repeat the line. Now, I must say, he did test positive for COVID, and I want to, on behalf of the state of Florida, wish President Biden a speedy recovery from COVID. And I also want to wish the United States of America a speedy recovery from Joe Biden.
All right, so Amir, I want to hear from Amir, and then Kelly, I'd like to hear from you too. But straw poll after the Trump event, just to the north of that, Trump got 78.7% of the vote in a straw poll. Granted, he had just spoken at that event, so the numbers are a little skewed. DeSantis coming in second with 19%. But Amir, if the Murdochs are in the bag for DeSantis, what does that mean for Trump if he does decide to run? What does that mean for DeSantis if he does decide to run as well?
I think it's much more challenging for Donald Trump. And it's not just the Post, the Wall Street Journal, the Post, both of them had pretty difficult editorials against Trump this week. And this is something that the people in Trump's camp, Steve Bannon has been saying it for about a month, that the Murdochs are in the bag for DeSantis. And there are these two competing camps. But I think more than the split on the Republican side, what's going to shape is really going to be who the candidate is on the Democrat side, whether it's going to be Biden who's in it. Nobody wants Kamala Harris. And who else will it be? Will it be Stacey Abrams? Will it be Cory Booker? Will it be Pete Buttigieg? Will it be Hillary Clinton and sort of an Ali versus Frazier sort of thing? It could be any of those. And I think that's really going to shape how much Trump or DeSantis has. Trump has that advantage of being able to say, I fixed all of those problems. So he has that benefit of incumbency whilst having that benefit of being the challenger of a very unpopular president.
Okay, panel, I'll tell you what, we'll pick this back up top of the hour. Kelly, I want to hear from you first. I think there's something to that. I think there's more to this, and it only seems to be growing. This fawning coverage of Ron DeSantis from the Post to Amir's point, the Journal, and Fox News as well. All right, thank you very much, Kelly, Rick, Amir. We'll do it again real soon. Alex, over to you.
Thanks, Rob. Here's what we're watching for today. Well, President Biden will deliver virtual remarks to the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives Conference. And that will be followed by a press briefing from Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre and COVID-19 response coordinator Dr. Ashish Jha on the latest on President Biden's COVID-19 status. And it is a busy day for former Vice President Mike Pence. First, speaking at the Young America Foundation's annual National Conservative Student Conference. And then
our very own Greta Van Susteren sat down with the former Attorney General Bill Barr and asked him how the United States should handle the fentanyl crisis in the country, in case you missed it.
The United States is relegated to working through Mexico to try to deal with the cartels, and I think that's a losing proposition because I don't think the Mexicans, at least with this administration, are serious enough. I think they have to be forced and pushed into action with us. I think we have to be more active against the cartels. In my mind, we have to approach the cartels more like ISIS and less like the mafia. And the idea of a case-by-case prosecution down there to stop these organizations would be like going after, ISIS and Syria on the same basis. They are effectively terrorist organizations.
More interviews like that on the record with Greta Van Susteren weekdays at 6 p.m. Eastern here on NewsMax. And as the heat wave hits America, Mike Carter wanted to find out if people can afford an electric car. So he went looking for answers, inspired by those comments that we've been talking about by the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg.
We're for cutting the cost of electric vehicles because when you have an electric vehicle, then you're also going to be able to save on gas.
Do you think most Americans are in a place right now where they can afford an electric vehicle?
No, sir, I don't.
Do you own an electric vehicle?
No.
Do you own an electric vehicle?
No.
Do you own an electric vehicle?
No.
No, I don't.
Do you?
No, but my daughter has a hybrid.
Nah, I don't like them. You can't even hear them. I like engines. I like gas-powered vehicles.
You can already save money by owning an EV because even though it's sometimes more expensive up front, you save on fuel and you save on maintenance.
If people want electric cars, fine, but I believe the transition has to be done slowly.
Of course, the more pain we are all experiencing from the high price of gas, the more benefit there is for those who can access electric vehicles.
Pete Buttigieg says there's a silver linings to high gas prices. It means more people are going to buy electric. Do you agree with him?
No, there's no silver lining to high gas prices. It sucks all around.
What is actually powering these electric vehicles? Do you know where the energy comes from?
I don't. Do you know?
A lot of times it's coal plants.
That's the big issue because I'm retired now, but I was in the energy industry. And most of the electricity that's generated comes from natural gas.
Just how ready is America for the EV revolution? Well, even in liberal states like California, where electric cars are popular, extreme heat has at times forced the state to issue alerts like this one last summer, encouraging residents to conserve energy during peak hours, including avoiding the use of major appliances to avoid power outages. Just last week, extreme heat also causing electric vehicle pioneer Tesla to ask its drivers not to charge their cars during peak hours in order to avoid overloading Texas's power grid.
We grew up when they were burning coal in schools. All the public schools had coals. You're going to use anything you're going to do to make that electricity.
Does that make it green energy?
No, especially when you have to decompose the batteries. I think that's when you get into issues that become controversial.
So the solution to the problem actually lies with the oil industry. They aren't the bad guys, they are the good guys, because they are going to be one of the ones that provide the solutions.
In New York, for NewsMax, I'm Mike Carter.
Quite the take from our Transportation Secretary when inflation is at 9.1%, new cars up extremely high. Alex, what do you have for us?
Well, Christina, we're going to turn our attention to today's business headlines. And for a little help with that, we're going to welcome in global business analyst Hillary Fordwich. Good morning, Hillary. Happy Monday.
Good morning.
All right, let's start with the markets, which closed the week down on Friday. Now, this morning, futures are up ahead of the opening bell. But how about this? Traders are now bracing for the busiest week of corporate earnings, as well as insights into further interest rate hikes from the Federal Reserve. All right, Hillary, what are you expecting this week?
Well, this week, you're right. Absolutely, Alex. It's going to be a big week. We have Facebook, Amazon, Apple reporting this week, and also Google. All of their parents will be reporting. What's interesting is that last week, of course, Netflix, although they were down, they weren't down as much as investors had expected. What does this mean? I think it's actually fascinating how global corporate profits have actually stayed rather stable given the supply chain issues, the war in Ukraine, and with the Fed this week, they're going to meet on Wednesday. They're going to be obviously raising interest rates. It's anticipated to curb inflation. So it is going to be a huge week. To date, only about 20% of all companies have reported their earnings. And this week, about 175, including the big ones I mentioned, had. So this week is a major week. So buckle up and get ready.
Absolutely. And this, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen saying yesterday that the United States is not in a recession. Take a listen.
The labor market is now extremely strong. Even just during the last 3 months, net job gains averaged 375,000. This is not an economy that's in recession, but we're in a period of transition in which growth is slowing.
Hillary, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, let's look back to May when she said that she was wrong. She admitted she was wrong. Now, maybe she was hung out to dry and she was the one to go out and say that. But I don't know why we're putting so much stock, no pun intended, on those voices of people who have admitted that they're wrong. One thing I will say, the market is tremendously different than it's ever been. Just think about this. All the traders on Wall Street, everyone, all these young guys and gals, they were not even really teenagers when we had the last pullback, the last recession, the 2008 financial crisis. They really have never known a downturn. So even when we hear tremendously negative headwinds, the generation that was really cautious, those that went through the Depression, those of the Second World War, they're not in the market anymore. And the influence of parents that even experienced that aren't around anymore. I do think the market, the analysts and the traders, they're all far more optimistic than previous generations, which is why when you see and hear negative headwinds, it doesn't seem to affect the market in the same way. And actually, my theory there has been born in terms of consumer confidence. Consumer confidence is still up. People are still buying, people are still borrowing, and so the market grows.
You made some very interesting points there, Hillary. How about this? 3 Boeing factories have hit turbulence as roughly 2,500 workers are planning to go on strike next month following a new contract that the union felt was, quote, a contract that is not fair and equitable. Boeing saying that the offer included competitive raises and a generous retirement plan. Hillary, how do you see this whole thing playing out?
Well, a couple of things here. First of all, there's a week cooling period. You're absolutely right. They're planning to go on strike. That's August 1st, an entire week away. Well, a week can be a very long time when you're talking about negotiations. One thing that's interesting is when anyone goes on strike, really the one person or the people that retain their income during that strike are not the union members, but the union bosses. So the union bosses get an income no matter what. Very interesting point there. Secondly, when Boeing reports huge losses, the unions aren't indexed to them. They keep getting their salaries anyway. They are protected from that. One of the reasons that we've seen so many jobs leave the United States was actually the power of the unions. And look at somewhere like Detroit, decimated by unions, and why South Carolina has boomed in terms of workers, because the companies have gone to non-union states. Be very interesting to see if Boeing remains in those states where they strike.
Absolutely. How about this? This is a fascinating story. Famous billionaire Mark Cuban, who is well known for his role on the TV show Shark Tank, of course. Now, he's invested nearly $20 million into 85 companies from the show, but the successful entrepreneur has actually taken a net loss across all of his deals combined. Hillary, is this surprising to you, or is this something that you actually expected?
Well, actually, I didn't know about this. I don't think most people did. This loss, the biggest loss that he had actually was a breathalyzing firm. I thought it was rather actually an interesting idea where you breathe into your phone. It tells you your blood alcohol level. I would have thought that MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, would have loved that. So would everybody really embrace that. And that could have been something ubiquitous. Unfortunately, it sounds like, from what Mark Cuban said, that the leader, the CEO of that, kept giving him a pushback like, oh, I'm at networking events. Doesn't sound like perhaps that firm had great leadership. I don't know all the details. Not many people do. What's interesting about this is many people who watch the Shark Tank and the ratings that are so high for a network show, will they be effective when people know that those investments didn't do very well? Right. That question to be answered.
Very interesting stuff. Hillary Fordwich, thank you so much for coming on this morning. We always appreciate it.
Pleasure, Alex.
Thrown in November in a district that's been in blue hands since 2010.
He's joining us now for more on his campaign. It's Maryland State Delegate Neil Parrott. Neil, it's great to have you on. I mean, congratulations, number one. But Neil, you were up against some tough endorsements. Big names like Kevin McCarthy, Elise Stefanik, Donald Trump Jr. They endorsed your opponent, Matthew Foldy, in the primary. But you still won over about 64% of the votes. How did you do this?
Well, I'm very, very thankful for that result. You know, I just went to the people all the time. Also, I've been a state delegate for 12 years. And I've worked together with people across the district on many different issues, and they're used to working with me. They know that I am conservative. They can count on me as a conservative, and that I will work for them. And I have been working for them for the last 12 years. So now it's time to move towards November so that we can take on David Trone and beat him. You know, on the campaign trail, I kept asking people, is the country going in the right direction or the wrong direction? And the resounding answer is we're going in the wrong direction. And it's time to take back the House, get a Republican as Speaker of the House, get rid of Nancy Pelosi, and change the direction that our country's going in.
Yeah, Joe Biden, according to Quinnipiac, with a historically low 31% approval rating right now. Congressman, this is a rematch of the race in 2020, but a lot has changed, like you just said, nationwide, particularly in Maryland. What are the biggest issues to voters right now in your state?
Well, just on that change, one of the biggest things that changed is the map itself. Maryland in December passed a very terrible gerrymandered map, and I sued and partnered with Judicial Watch. We won the lawsuit, and as a result, now the district is much, much better. Instead of on the quick report being a D+6, now it's a D+1. 538 calls it an R+1. So things are looking very good with the map, and of course, the direction of this country is going in the wrong direction. That's very unfortunate, but it helps as people say, no, this Democrat-controlled presidency and Congress is just not working, and we need a big change. So I think we're going to see a big victory this coming November.
Yeah, huge victory on that. You changed the map, impressive. But you also have a new campaign video out. You portray Trone as a D.C. insider who sides with Nancy Pelosi and President Biden over the best interests of his constituents. What will you focus on if you win a seat in the House of Representatives this November?
Well, some of the first things that I'm going to focus on are the border. We have to close the border, and we have to do it right away. You know, maybe we won't get past President Biden, but we're going to send bills to his desk to make sure that happens. And we're going to keep putting good bills forward. For one thing, also, we can't continue to spend trillions and trillions of dollars that we don't have. We're borrowing it from China or we're printing it. And there's no, everyone can understand why inflation is going up like it is. When you have a whole lot more of something, it becomes worth less than it was. And so, of course, if the dollar's worth less, the bread is still costing the same, the gasoline is still costing the same, you're going to pay a lot more for that product. And that's what we're seeing across this country right now. And the city of Baltimore, it's double-digit inflation, along with a few other cities in the country.
Right.
But if they continue to spend like they're spending, we're going to see double-digit inflation everywhere. And unfortunately, David Trone wants to do Build Back Better. He wants to spend another few $1 trillion. We can't afford it. We need to cut back. And one thing you'll have with me in Congress is I won't be wastefully spending our money.
Okay, and we'll get those GDP numbers out on Thursday. If we are down for a second straight quarter, we could formally be in a recession by the end of the week. That's how real the problem is right now. Larry Hogan, the governor of Maryland, somebody I know that you know well, was asked over the weekend if he's running for president in 2024. Take a listen.
And does what happened in Maryland, I mean, it was a loss for you. I mean, you weren't on the ballot, but it was a loss for you. Does this make you more or less likely to run for president in 2024?
Well, it makes me more determined than ever to continue the battle to win win over the Republican Party and take us back to a bigger tent, more Reagan-esque party. We've got our work cut out for us, but I'm certainly not giving up.
Is Larry Hogan running for president in 2024?
Well, all signs point that he will. He's a very pragmatic person. I think if he comes towards the election and realizes there's no path at all, then he won't run. But I think he sees a clear path, kind of like John McCain saw when he won the nomination, which is you lose Iowa, all the Democrats in New Hampshire can switch over and vote. They're allowed to change parties. He wins New Hampshire. He starts to win South Carolina. He could get a string of victories there. And that's what happened to John McCain. He did win, especially if the conservatives are divided among several different candidates. And a lot of that will depend on what Donald Trump does. He may run against Donald Trump knowing that he's going to lose just to make a point. I could also see that happening.
Yeah, interesting.
Neil Parrott, thanks for joining us this morning. You ran an impressive campaign, and we're excited to see what happens this November. But make sure you stick with Newsmax all morning, days after getting attacked on stage. New York Congressman...
Where were you? Were you in Seattle?
I'm in Seattle planning our move east.
Move east to Idaho.
As far east as Idaho, that's
yes,
right.
Yes, not super far east. By the way, is Putin back in Moscow? Because we haven't seen any reporting that we all saw him arrive in Iran, but nobody saw him leave.
I don't think we know where he is, really. He's either back in the bunker in Moscow or he's still hanging out in Iran. And then what would he still be doing there? Most state visits take about a day.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then on that grain deal, the grain deal ink wasn't even wet on the piece of paper before 4 cruise missiles from Moscow go flying into grain silos. So was that an embarrassing thing for Putin, or was that planned?
Very bizarre, because this was a really big deal. The fact that they were finally able to negotiate a deal, it means it means a lot, especially to that part of the world. But
Right.
we rely on Ukrainian and Russian agricultural exports as well here in the United States. Most people are not aware of that. I want to talk about some news that we heard over the weekend that Vladimir Putin may have used a body double in Iran. And I'm wondering, Turkey was there. Turkish leaders were there. Turkey's a NATO country. If this was true, why wouldn't they expose that to the rest of the world? But are these pictures, is that Vladimir Putin or is that somebody else? Looks like Putin to me.
Yeah, I think it's Putin, and here's why. Think about the backlash. If he's trying to court Turkey and Iran to do something that he wants them to do, why on earth would he insult them by showing up with some sort of actor who can't even speak to Russian issues? So I don't really put a lot of stock in this. Plus, the guy getting off that airplane that day was certainly dragging a heel, and he wasn't looking very healthy. And then back to the food piece, which is probably the most important piece of all strategically. You see Lavrov now in Egypt, hat in hand, on a big tour going down through Africa to explain, don't worry, the food's coming. He can't make that claim with any type of surety at all based on what Russia's done.
Yeah, and then so the BBC article that we talked about on Friday, that the CIA has basically no intelligence that suggests that Putin is in bad health, was reinforced by the director of the CIA, who yesterday said that Putin looks entirely too healthy. That was in the Wall Street Journal. So maybe he's not sick. But we had a Ukrainian member of parliament, Alexei Goncharenko, on with us for the first time in a little while earlier this morning. And I asked him about this proposal that the U.S. may actually send U.S., not NATO, U.S. fighter jets to Ukraine to help fight against the Russian army. Take a listen.
We see that understanding of that Ukraine needs air force, but we will be completely run out because we have losses, not such high like Russians, but we have them and we don't produce them. So the only possibility for us to have air force, which is vital, is to switch to Western aircrafts. And first of all, the best option is F-16, F-15 fighter jets. And finally, we hear that American officials are beginning to say that it is on the table.
General, why would they make that public? Why wouldn't that be done in a covert fashion?
Such poor optics strategy. And then there's no credibility because we can't even get the weapons that have been promised right now. The HIMARS systems aren't showing up. Where's NASAMS and all those types of things? In fact, it's so embarrassing that our government even advised the Ukrainian government, you should not do the counteroffensive in Kherson because you lack the military power to do that. And it's Ukraine's like, right.